Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and happy holidays. I know most of you are already back in your hometowns, enjoying the last days of Ramadan, and also preparing the Eid celebrations, or simply, getting together with friends and with relatives. And I hope you're having a wonderful and restful time with your loved ones. And it's really great to see you, although we have to do it online, asynchronously. So today we're going to have a short lecture about issues in literature for our research methodology class. And so this is for all classes, yeah? A, B, and C. I know we are already in the holiday mood, but please think of it as a short academic check-in before we get back to class, we get back to campus, and into the full swing of everything. So even though we're not in the classroom, hopefully you could still give me full attention while listening to this lecture. So the core of what we're doing remains the same. We're learning how to build arguments about literature, and our goal is to always persuade an audience. Yeah? In this case, our audience are our readers when we publish an article, or simply your lecturers. So again, our goal is to always persuade an audience to accept our claims or our arguments. Now, to build a strong argument, of course, we need a good strategy. Yeah? This involves offering evidence from the text and also clearly showing our reasoning. And we also need to be aware of the assumptions we're making. And sometimes we might also employ or use other kinds of appeals. What do we mean by appeals? So for example, in no criticism, we only need to refer to the text, but with other kinds of appeals like socio-historical context, we would need to connect the work or the text into its historical moment. So that is what we mean by appeals. But before we can do any of that, we have to start with the most fundamental step, that is identifying the issue itself. So, what exactly is an issue in literature? Yeah? What we mean by issue here is actually not a theme or a topic, but of course we could develop this into a topic, a theme, and then a thesis statement. So first of all, let's agree on the definition of issue in literature in today's lecture. So an issue is simply something about which people have disagreed or might disagree. So there is no clear answer to that. And it's a question that doesn't have an obvious or immediate answer. In other words, there is this sense of ambiguity. It's not clear what is the answer to that question. Now, the thing is, how do we start finding these issues? Yeah? It's not as complicated as you think. It's actually much simpler than you might think. How do we do that? So you could begin by noting the questions that occur to you as you read. Yeah? So whatever literary text you read or a movie, a film that you watch, we always have questions. So as you read or as you watch a movie, you could begin noting or taking notes of the questions that occur to you, that you have in your mind. The most important thing here is that you just need to be curious. And always realize that for any event or description in a story, other alternatives could have existed. In other words, when you have a question, there is no single answer to that. So we need to be open to other possibilities or other alternatives that could have existed. The author made a choice, and that choice is often a gateway or a door to an issue. Yeah. So if you take a look at this flow, to start identifying an issue, we need to note questions that occur to us, and then we also need to be open-minded that other alternatives or other possibilities, other answers may have also existed. So your answer is not the only answer. As long as we could have evidence to justify the answer, then those alternatives are justified. Now, today's lecture is going to outline 10 specific issues that we can explore. We're going to use again, hopefully you're not bored of this, but I can say that this is actually one of the best ways to really understand that even a short story, like everyday use, can be seen from various perspectives, and the alternatives are limitless. So once again, there are 10 issues that we're going to explore in literary research using everyday use. Now, let's take a look at this mind map. There are 10 issues in literature. As I said earlier, issue is simply something in which we don't really know the answer to that question, and this could refer to, a fact in a story, a fact that is not clear, there is ambiguity, and that opens up to an issue. So the first one is an issue of fact. Don't worry, so I'm going to explain every single issue here. But let's just take a look at the summary first. So the first one is the issue of fact. The second is the issue of theme. The third is the issue of symbolism. And the next one is the issue of definition. And then the issue of pattern, the issue of evaluation, the issue of historical and cultural context, the issue of genre, the issue of social policy, and also the issue of cause and effect. So one story can be approached using 10 different issues, and actually even each issue can also be approached by different approaches or literary theories. Let's take a look at each theory or each issue one by one. Now, before we start with each issue, keep in mind that issues are reflected in the research questions. That's why in writing an article or writing a research proposal, we always need to start with research questions. Questions that you have about a story, and we write the questions in more academic forms. So issues are reflected in the research questions. We will also provide research questions for each issue in a moment. Again, we will use the story everyday use to explore various issues. So now let's talk about the issues of fact. We actually use the plural form issues of fact in this case to show that even for fact there are many different gaps. So what do we mean by issues of fact? Literature is full of what we call gaps, or as I mentioned earlier, ambiguities. So it's full of what we call gaps, and gaps here refer to moments when certain facts are left out or are a bit unclear, or it's actually intentionally made unclear, to create conflicts, to create suspense. Because of these gaps in literary work or in a movie, readers or viewers can come up with various answers to a question. We only really tackle these questions of fact if we suspect the answer will change the overall view of the story. I think we also experience this whenever we read a story or we watch a movie together with friends, and then there is a fact in the story that is not clear, and then you are debating, you are discussing this gap with a friend and then, you come up with different answers. Why? Because we don't really have enough information in the story. That's why we create assumptions. So, once again, we only really tackle or try to answer these questions of fact if we believe that when we provide an answer, this answer will change the overall view of the story. So literature, and then gaps, various answers. Now here are some examples of research questions when we use issues of fact. Yeah, again, we refer to everyday use. As we know that the story never explains Dee's father. Yeah? The father, we don't know whether he is still alive or whether he already passes away. So we could come up with various assumptions. What happened to Dee's father, and how did his absence shape the family dynamics and Mama's role as a single parent? I'm very sure we can create different assumptions about this. Another possibility, fact, because it's not clear, we could also ask question about Hakim, a barber, Dee's boyfriend. What role did Dee's boyfriend, Hakim, a barber, play in her life, in Dee's life, and how did their relationship influence her views on heritage? Yeah? We could, come up with an assumption, maybe because Hakim is from Africa and Dee is affected and she wants to change her name. Or maybe because, another assumption in this case, maybe because Hakim joins a movement called Black Pride movement, and Dee is interested in the movement. Yeah, so yeah, they have the same perception about cultural heritage. Another possibility, another fact, that we know we do not have an obvious answer to. So how do Mama and Maggie move forward after the conflict over the quilts? Yeah, after Dee returns to town, we could make an assumption. How do Mama and Maggie move forward after the conflict? And what does their future look like? Remember that in the story, Dee says, but from what I can see, I don't think you understand the meaning of heritage. Yeah, so they simply are leading different paths of life. Yeah. So these are some examples of research questions in which we deal with the issues of fact. Now let's go to the second one, issues of theme. Now, what do we mean by issues of theme? A theme is the main claim or idea an author seems to be making. It's an assertion that needs at least one full sentence to express. So, as you develop your argument, you'll need to decide if you're stating your theme as an observation or a recommendation. Yeah? So what do we mean by this? Let's take a look at the example of a theme in the form of an observation and a recommendation. So here are two examples of thesis statements that reflect the theme. Yeah? Two examples of thesis statements to show the difference between observation and recommendation. So let's just say we talk about tradition as the result of modern education. If your thesis statement, your sentence in this case, you want to write your sentence, your thesis statement in the form of an observation, so the sentence could be like this. Some people tend to separate themselves from their tradition when they get modern education. So you simply want to describe that something like this can happen. You do not lecture people, you do not preach, you do not suggest that people should do this or should not do that. You simply just, describe. So in this case, Um, you play a role as an observer or a journalist. Yeah? A journalist does not recommend. A journalist only reports. However, we can also see a lot of examples of these statements in the form of a recommendation. Using a word like should or should not, or must not. That's too strong, maybe. Yeah. So let's look at the example. For recommendation, the thesis statement, with the same theme but different sentence. One should not separate oneself from tradition just because he or she receives modern education. So it's like lecturing people. It's like suggesting or telling people to do this or not to do that. So in this case, you play a role as a teacher or as a preacher, as an ustada. All right, so you see the difference. Now, here are some examples of research questions that can lead to issues of theme. How does everyday use explore the relationship between gender and racism? How does the story Everyday Use reveal the theme of dysfunctional family? How does the story explore the complexities of mother-daughter relationships? How does the story explore the divide between formal education and practical lived knowledge? Now, if you take a look at these 4 examples, the keywords can also tell you what approach to take. For example, number 1, since the keywords are gender and racism, then there is a potential to explore this theme using gender studies, feminism, but also because there is racism, it could be post-colonial feminism. Yeah. Number 2, with the keyword dysfunctional family, and also number 3, mother-daughter relationships. So number 2 and 3 can take us to psychoanalysis. Yeah, but these 2 are all dealing with the issues of theme. Number 4, the divide between formal education and practical lived knowledge. Basically, this could be anything. Yeah, it could be feminism, it could be sociological criticism, but we are dealing with the issue of theme. Hopefully, this is clear enough. Now, let's move on to number 3, issues of definition. Now, issues of definition come up when we try to decide what an author means by a particular word. This happens even with ordinary language. In everyday use, we know that there are conflicts, and the conflict isn't just about quilts. It's about the very definition of heritage. Yeah, if you go back to the story, the word heritage is actually used once, almost at the end of the story, when Dee is about to leave the house, and Dee says, from what I know, I don't think you understand the meaning of heritage. Yeah, so when she mentions heritage, she does not explain what that is, and we are left we are left hanging. What is actually the definition of heritage according to Dee, and how does Mama and how do Mama and Maggie take this? Do they even understand the meaning of heritage, for example? Okay, so once again, the conflict in the story is not just about quilts, but it's about the definition of heritage. So a great research question would be, let's look at the examples. How do Mama and Dee define names, and how does this reflect their differences in perceiving family heritage? Yeah, so what is the meaning of name? It's not about the meaning of that name, but how does the name carry, particular nuances. So number 1 is the issue of the definition of name. Number two, this is about the definition of heritage. How do female characters in everyday use differ in their definitions of heritage? And also, we could problematize the phrase everyday use. Yeah, the title of the story, but it's also used by D. Yeah, when D says that Maggie does not understand the meaning of quilt enough, so that she might put it to everyday use. So what might Alice Walker, in this case the author, what might Alice Walker mean by the phrase everyday use as in the story title? All right. Now, let's go to symbolism. The issues of symbolism focus on a particular image, and we question its meaning and purpose. It may sound like it's the issues of definition also, and in fact, they may overlap, because even the word quilt may also symbolize something. But issues of symbolism always focus on a particular image. So we question the meaning and the purpose. Is it just a detail? Is it just a thing? Is it just an object? Or does it represent something bigger? Yeah, for example, quilt. Is it just, a patchwork and, to be used as a bed cover, or maybe, a bed cover, for example. But it may actually represent something bigger than that. So that's what we mean by issues of symbolism. Let's look at the examples. What things or what objects in the story may symbolize something else and may create different interpretations. Question number one, research question number one. How do the quilts symbolize different interpretations of heritage and tradition for Dee, Mama, and Maggie? Another thing that may also symbolize something bigger is, the setting. We know the setting of the story is in the rural area, but from the way Dee dresses, it also represents urban lifestyle. So we can come up with this research question. How does the contrast between the rural setting and Dee's urban lifestyle symbolize the tension between tradition and modernity? All right, so this is really interesting. Yeah, setting as the image, rural versus urban, and this contrast may symbolize the tension, the conflict, the difference between tradition and modernity, between, village life and city life. Another example, we could think of the handmade objects. How does the story use the symbolism of handmade objects to critique the commodification of culture? Yeah, this refers to quilt also, but not just quilt, because other objects that Dee wants to bring back to the city, they are all handmade objects. Okay, so from issues of symbolism, we proceed to the next issue, that is issues of pattern. Now, when we look at issues of pattern, we observe how a text is organized, how a text is structured, how do certain parts in a story relate to others, what is the meaning and purpose of any pattern that you find, and also equally important is questions such as what happens when the text breaks its own pattern. Yeah, all stories have patterns. and if a pattern is disrupted, it may actually show a pattern in itself. Yeah, even wars have patterns. Okay, so let's look at the example. What patterns of behavior or speech distinguish Dee from Mama and Maggie, and how do these patterns reflect their differing values? Yeah. So in this case, we talk about language, because when we speak, language also has patterns. So the way people speak, the words that they use, also show maybe the differences in values, maybe also the differences in the educational background, differences in social status. So we know about this from the language patterns. Another equally important pattern in a literary work is what we call motif. M-O-T-I-F, yeah? It's not M-O-T-I-V-E because the meaning is different. In literature, motif, M-O-T-I-F, refers to recurring patterns, something that appears again and again in a story. So in this case, the recurring motifs in everyday use are quilts, and then fire, and also names. So what recurring motifs appear in the story, and how do they contribute to its overall meaning or overall theme in a story? Or you might want to look at the narrative structure of everyday use, and how does the narrative structure of the story contribute to each theme and messages. Yes. The next issues now, issues of historical and cultural context. Issues of historical and cultural context require us to be specific. Are we looking at the life of the author, Alice Walker? Are we looking at the time period it was written, that is the 1970s, or the time period within the text? Yeah, so it's different. The story was written in 1970s, but the setting may be different. So which one are we looking at? Are we looking at the time period it was written, or are we looking at the time period within the text? So a grade, or even the forms in which the work has been published. So a great question in this case would be, how does the story reflect the tensions between traditional African American culture and the Black Power movement of the 1960s and the 1970s? Yeah? To be able to do this, we need to examine the historical and cultural context. Yeah, the reason why Dee has changed her name into Wanjiro, it's not only an individual intention, but it should actually reflect something. But to understand this, we need to read historical notes. Yeah? So there is a movement called Black Power movement. Okay, so let's continue. We've just talked about what do we mean by issues of historical and cultural context, and now let's look at some of the examples of research questions using these issues. Example number 1, how does the story address the complexities of African American identity in the post-civil rights era? To be able to answer this question using everyday use as the backdrop, of course we would need to read, we would need to know about the civil rights movement in 1965 to 1963 to 1965. And this happened, the Black Power movement happened after the civil rights movement. So we need to know about African American identity, African American identity, and how complex it is after the civil rights movement. So it's not enough just to read the story. We would need to know more about the historical context. Another example would be, how does the story reflect the tensions or the conflict between traditional African American culture and the Black Power movement of the 1960s and the 1970s? Yeah, so as seen in number one, we would need to understand African American culture and the more specific cultural note like Black Power movement. Example number three looks into the evolution or the change of classic literature. How have the themes and motives in classic literature evolved over time, and what factors have influenced these changes? So question number three actually does not specifically address everyday use, but perhaps you could use everyday use as an example to see the change or the evolution of classic literature, or in this case African American literature, from the time before the Civil War to the modern time. Another more general question would be like, to what extent do literary works reflect the societal and cultural values of the time period in which they were written? We could always specify this question. So we changed the phrase literary works to, a novel or a story or a movie. How does a particular movie reflect the societal and cultural values of the time period in which they were written? Not necessarily the setting of the story, but the time the story was written. All right, let's move on to the next one, issues of evaluation. We make judgments, we evaluate the ideas, the characters, actions, and even the artistic quality of the text. And this can be philosophical, ethical, or aesthetic. For example, an ethical evaluation of D might lead to the question, in what ways does the character development of D show a lack of gratitude? And is the story judging her for it? That is the philosophical or the ethical evaluation of D. Maybe because, after being sent for education to the city, she doesn't show gratitude to her mom. So do you think the story is judging her for this lack of gratitude? Some examples here. In what ways does everyday use serve as a good representation of stories about African American women? Or how does the character development of D reveal the downside of Black Power movement? So the disadvantages or the drawbacks. In what ways does the character development of D show lack of gratitude? So we evaluate the character development, we evaluate maybe the story from the philosophical, ethical, or aesthetic point of view. The next one, so this slide explains two different issues. The first one, issues of genre. Issues of genre are about categorization. What kind of text is it? For example, how does everyday use fit into the genre of African American literature, and what traditions does it draw upon? Not necessarily because the characters are all African American, but are there any characteristics or features that show this story fits into the genre of African American literature? Now, issues of policy look at how literature can instigate social reform. Literature can improve, can lead to social reform. For example, in the case of letters of Kartini, we know that letters of Kartini can instigate social reform. This is where we propose solutions to cultural problems or societal problems or even political problems. So a question here could be, in what ways can everyday use be integrated into an English curriculum to raise students' awareness of gender issues? Yeah. So literature in education in this case. Let's look at some of the examples. How does everyday use fit into the genre of African American literature, and what traditions or themes does it draw upon? What role, this is the second example, what role does oral storytelling play in the narrative, and how does it connect to African American literary traditions? In what ways does the story reflect the characteristics of feminist literature, particularly in its portrayal of Mama and Maggie? So these three examples show issues of genre and literary traditions. Two examples here on this slide show issues of social policy. What are the implications of the conclusion of everyday use? And what message does it convey about the potential for women's agency in society? So, you could strongly feel this sense of feminist movement from the term women's agency. The second example, how literature can be integrated into the school curriculum. In what ways can everyday use be integrated in English curriculum to raise students' awareness of gender issues? Now, the next one is issues of cost and effect. Yeah, this is the last issue, the last set of issues. So, lastly, issues of cause and effect often arise when we try to explain a character's behavior. Yeah, we ask about why the character does this and what is the impact of this behavior, the consequence. Remember, even the narrator is a character with motives. Yeah, in this case, motives not with F, but motives here, reasons why people do something. A simple but also powerful question for everyday use can be, what are the contributing factors to these behavioral changes? Now, let's look at two more examples. How did Mama's relationship with her own parents influence her parenting style and her values? How does Mama's unfulfilled dreams lead to her different treatments to her daughters? Yeah, we know at the beginning of the story, Mama actually dreams of being on TV. Yeah, but this is an unfulfilled dream, and how does this unfulfilled desire lead to different treatments to Dee as compared to Maggie? So, as you can see, the type of issue you choose to focus on will completely shape your research question and eventually your thesis statement. So for your assignment, this is going to be a group assignment, you'll be creating 3 questions, or maybe 4, depending on the number of members in the group. So you'll be creating questions about everyday use, and then you will categorize them into these different issues, so the 10 issues. So this exercise is designed to help you see the range of possibilities in a text and to practice formulating the kinds of questions, and the questions will lead to strong arguable thesis. Have fun with it and discuss it with your group mates online, and we will be available if you have any questions. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your holiday, and we look forward to seeing your work. Stay safe and send our best regards to the family. Bye, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.